Good evening, everyone. I have 6:01 and a quorum of commissioners, so I'm going to open up tonight's Conservation Commission meeting for August 25th, 2002. We are meeting at the Wacoit Meeting Room, Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, broadcast live on local cable channel 18 and stream live on the Town of Mashpee website. Would you please first stand and join me for a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to start off by saying I'm thankful for a little bit of rain that we seem to get. I've been telling my friends and family that the new American desert is Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Drew, would you like to start with any of the pre- and post-hearing agendas?
Sure, we can start with the approval of the meeting minutes, 2 sets of meeting minutes. First one being from July 14th, 2022. And everyone who's present tonight was present at that meeting with the exception of Commissioner Steve Cook. But we have a quorum to approve those minutes.
I wasn't either for the 14th.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, you weren't here either. But we do have Brian.
I wasn't there either, Drew.
Oh, right, thank you, Charlie. So those commissioners present tonight for a quorum to vote on those would be Paul, Brian, Marjorie, and Tom.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to accept the minutes, please?
Go ahead.
Go.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept and approve the Mashpee Conservation Commission meeting minutes from Thursday, July 14th, 2022.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a second?
Now I can second.
Thank you, Marjorie. Any discussion relative to the motion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
She
Oh,
wasn't- nope.
she's not. Marjorie?
It would
Yes.
be, yeah,
Thank you. And I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
thank you. And the next set of minutes to be approved is July 28th, 2022, and the commissioners present for voting on those minutes are Paul, Brian, Charlie, Marjorie, Alex, and Tom.
Thank you, Drew. Is there a motion to accept those minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of 7/20/22.
Thank you, Charlie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alex. Any discussion relative to the motion that's on the table? There being none, I'll call for a vote. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Tom?
Aye.
And I vote yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we're good, Charlie.
Yeah.
I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
Thank you. Do we want to move to the,
First hearing?
yeah.
Okay. I will call to order the first hearing, the 6 o'clock hearing for Kevin and Christine Granfield, 40 Bayview Road. This is a proposed removal of an existing timber wall and replaced with a new vinyl sheet pile wall or approved equal from lot line to lot line, landward of the existing salt marsh and MHW, mean high water line, following the original existing wall toe alignment, and to reestablish grades behind the wall with 180 square feet of creeping junipers to be planted 2 feet behind the new wall. All work is above the mean high water. Additionally, remove existing landing, remove and reset ramp, construct and maintain a 4-foot by 20-foot proposed access stairs, landing with utilities supported by a 4x4 post. Remove 2 spruce trees, 1 Norway maple, and 1 pine tree. Representatives, Cape and Island Engineering, This is an NOI. Good evening, sir.
For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Granfield at 40 Bayview Road. Sorry. First, I do want to say that there is a notice of intent number issued for this permit. Number is 43-3200. Yeah, this project, the main work is for the reconstruction of a timber bulkhead. For those of you who were in a hearing a couple of years ago, we did a similar reconstruction of a timber bulkhead to the abutter just to the north. So this abutter now to the south, and this application is to kind of continue what was improved on the neighbor. These two properties used to have a joint bulkhead. It was timber, and after 30 or so years, after 30 or so years, the timber has been deteriorating, and there's sumps or sinkholes happening behind the bulkhead. The bulkhead does not reach, or mean high water does not reach the bulkhead, so this is all happening above mean high water, but there is a submarsh that comes all the way up to the bulkhead. So the proposal here is to deconstruct the existing timber bulkhead and in its place install a vinyl sheet pile bulkhead with tiebacks every 10 feet. It's similar to the design that was done to the north. The only difference is the project to the north used what they call the box vinyl sheet piles. Those are the ones that have like a corrugated look to them. This neighbor wants to have the flat face vinyl, so it will look like a straight wall all along the front of the bulkhead. In addition to that, they have an existing 10A permit float, and they have a ramp going from the existing top of the bulkhead to that float. What we want to do is reinstall that ramp on top of the new bulkhead, and then towards the existing house, instead of having the homeowners walk down the slope, which is a coastal bank, have an above grade stairs to access from the deck down to the ramp and eventually down to the float. A couple of improvements also proposed is the removal of the Norway maple that is compromising the house, and there's actually two structures on the property. 2 spruce on the property and a pine that's very close to the house. And the improvements that are being done, there's 2 downspouts on the 2 back corners of the existing house that currently discharge to surface. What we're proposing to do is intercept those 2 downspouts with 2 dry wells as an improvement to lessen the amount of runoff that's going down the bank. And the first 4 feet behind the new constructed bulkhead, we're proposing to install native junipers. The junipers not only add natural vegetation to this buffer, but it also helps in slowing down any runoff that's making it down to the bulkhead. Another change that this bulkhead is doing, the existing timber bulkhead is roughly at elevation 5 at the top. There's some areas that are 4.8s and 4.7s. We're proposing this new bulkhead to be higher. So the top of the bulkhead is going to be at 6.5. And then from the 6.5 behind the bulkhead, we grade back to existing grades. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. I'm going to open the questioning and comments up to the commissioners first. Raul, while I'm waiting, these 4x4 posts, what do they have for a foundation? They just set into the soil, or?
4 feet down is the typical 4x4 post to hold a stair access is the
Right.
typical installation, 4 foot down.
Okay.
Drew, are creeping juniper something we typically, or like those considered a native planting?
They are on the Cape Cod, Barnstable Cooperative Extension list of recommended native plants. Salt tolerant too, so they would be conducive to this location.
I mean, we typically don't do a single species though, right? Like we typically try to ask for it to be varied in case it's stressed. What's the salt marsh species that blooms in the fall? The white
That's the,
marsh out there?
If I could,
high
this,
tide bush.
this, this buffer is at elevation rift, 6. So a salt marsh species will not survive at that elevation.
No, it's like I made a misspoke.
Beach plum? Beach
Yeah,
plum.
or like the groundsel.
Groundsel bush.
Bush?
Yeah,
That
but
would-
groundsel bush isn't obligate, it would need to be at a lower elevation.
It
so
would
would
need to be
subject
lower?
to flooding. Yeah,
Okay.
otherwise it's gonna struggle above the wall.
If the commission wants a variety, because we're so close to the bulkhead, I don't want the commission to have shrubs. I don't want the roots from shrubs pushing against a new wall. But alternative to what we're proposing could be native grasses. There are native grasses, and they could just be allowed to grow natural, but nothing that would have strong roots that could push against this bulkhead.
What's so it's going to be a higher elevation. So you're going to be grading that whole area. So how far is the disturbance going to go of the soil?
It's about 4 feet. That's why I'm choosing that 4 feet for the new plantings.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's like my only hesitation with it is that it just needs a stronger buffer to kind of intercept anything coming from the house if it can. So either like grasses, I would prefer shrubs, but I hear what you're saying about the roots. What do you think, Drew?
Do you think that the root systems from the creeping junipers would cause any issue? I mean, those are a category of shrubs, so.
They stay small enough, and their
Yeah.
roots don't grow as big as what I'm comparing to shrubs. I'm thinking like bayberries and inkberries that do have some good-sized roots
Yeah.
that could push against this. But if a variety is preferred,
I think a good, maybe a mix of a couple of different coastal grass species and juniper. And I did speak with the homeowner when I was on site to take photos, and she asked if it would be okay if they actually planted up the entire bank with native species, because they don't want lawn there anymore. So that might be, it's not part of the application, it was something that she mentioned during the on-site. So I think that you'll see probably eventually a pretty robust mix of,
Okay.
if it's further than 4 feet, we could go with something more than just grasses and the junipers.
yeah.
And if the homeowner is willing to do that, we could do another row behind the 4 feet.
Okay.
They didn't get into specifics, they just said, are we allowed to do this? And I said, absolutely. You want to get rid of lawn that close to the resource area, by all means, encourage
Yeah.
it. So,
What they have back there is not technically lawn, because they can barely mow it. It's so
Yeah,
steep.
that's why they don't want to deal with
It's
it.
just whatever grass is growing, and it's mostly bare.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie, do you have any questions out there in Never Never Land?
Yeah, no, sounds good to me.
Okay. Marjorie? What's that?
No, I had a chance to actually review this today, and all looks in order.
Okay.
I'm good.
Brian? Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be making a motion to approve this with the conditions, Drew.
Yeah, there was just a couple of things I wanted to mention, but yeah, you could see they were.
Excuse me, can we just go to the people up there, if there's any questions?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Are there any questions from people that are here in attendance tonight? Okay, we're good.
So there weren't any, just just to go back to photos of the site, just to illustrate what Raul had described previously. This top left here is showing the house from the road. This is the Norway maple here that's flagged for removal. This is the pitch pine in the background that you can see is kind of growing out over the house. Spruce right here, again, pitch pine, and there's another spruce. I got the same photo, the same one, but there's another one adjacent to the Norway maple over here that's pretty much dead. It's in a state of failure. Spruces are not native to the area, and Norway maples are a known invasive species. So just to show the commissioners where those species are at, they're on the landward side of the property. Then looking at the backyard on the seaward side where the proposed bulkhead wall, you can see here, this is the existing timber wall. You've got some old tie steps leading down to additional steps to access the salt marsh and water. And then you can see where the bank, current condition of the bank is really just a mix of sparse grasses. I did also note the presence, you can't really see it too well, but over here and some of these clumps that you see, looking at the lower left photo, that's all Japanese knotweed. So the homeowner's aware of that, and they do want to see what they can do to eradicate it, because it's not a lot of knotweed, but this is the prime opportunity when you've got a relatively small amount to do anything you can to get rid of it. And the other thing too, Raul, when this gets excavated out, I know in the project narrative, you mentioned using that fill, that excavated fill to backfill. You want to make sure that those knotweeds are screened out of that fill before you put it back in, because sometimes just yanking them out of the surface doesn't get as deep as you need. So you just want to make sure that we work with the homeowner to try and come up with a strategy to eradicate the knotweed in that area. And one of the other things, I don't know, wasn't mentioned in the project narrative, but I would think that this stairway is no longer of any use, it's just leading to salt marsh. Was this something that could be removed?
I know it has to be removed for the reconstruction.
Yeah, but would it be necessary? Do you think it's necessary to have it put back in? I failed to talk to the homeowner about it. It didn't occur to me at the time, but it would be nice to see that taken out if it's not really serving any function. You have the ramp at a height that's proper access for underneath for public access. So if that's something that could be removed, just so we can get some vegetation growth underneath in that area of the salt marsh, I think that would be beneficial. No other comments.
Thank you.
I don't know if the commission wants to make that a condition, or if you want to have an opportunity to speak with the homeowner about it. I don't know what the...
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like you said, it seems like it's just stepping down into the marsh.
Yeah.
I know they want to do this work, so at the moment, I will just ask for it to be removed. If they want to reintroduce it, I'll get in touch with them to get it reintroduced. I don't know how long those stairs have been there. I know the steps down the bank have been there since the 90s, so I'm not sure. I'm thinking those stairs have been there about the same.
Probably. They look like it's been a while.
And I don't think there'll be a record on the state level, meaning like Chapter 91, because they end before mean high water.
Right.
And so I don't know if that was a beach access from one time long ago.
Maybe. That's probably what it was, I would imagine. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll have to review that particular item with the homeowner. But at the moment, I didn't have a plan for it.
Okay.
Set? Okay. Do we have a motion from the commissioner?
Just to be clear, we're putting in the condition for the removal of the steps, or?
Yes.
Okay. So I move to close an issue with Kevin and Christine Granfield at 40 Bayview Road with the condition of the removal of old steps over the salt marsh and removal of invasive knotweed.
Thank you, Brian. Do I have a
Can we add a condition to vary the plantings so that it's not just one species?
So we can amend it to, with a revised mitigation plan, right? Or,
That,
Or just, I would say just a condition of greater variety of mitigation plantings.
okay, I'll add that to the motion.
thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alex. Any further discussion by the commission before I call for a vote? Hearing none? Tom, how do you vote? Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marge?
Yes.
And Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Got a light show going on here tonight. Now calling the 6:03 hearing, Leanna Orr and Jesse Oberst, 7 Slipper Shell Way, proposed raise and replace of existing single-family dwelling, upgrade septic system and landscaping. Representative, Holmes and McGrath Incorporated. This is an NOI.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi, now representing Homes and McGrath for the applicant at 7 Slipper Shell Way. I will say, as of this afternoon, there is no notice of intent number issued. So I believe a couple of months ago or last month, this project could still be open, and the issuance or the closure will take place in a continuance date, waiting for the notice of intent number to be issued. So I'll proceed with that, knowing that we have to continue until we get the notice of intent for this particular project. So that what the applicant is looking to do at this property is raise the existing single-family dwelling, remove the existing septic system, remove the existing parking area, remove the existing patio, and in its place, construct a new residence with a new Title V system, enhanced alternative technologies, and construct a paved or gravel area for parking over the septic system. The resources within 100 feet of this property is a salt marsh to the north and west. There is a coastal bank, not on the property, but on the properties to the north and the west. And a lot of the work is taking place within the buffer zones to the coastal bank. There is a portion that's also taking place within the 100-foot buffer to the salt marsh, but the majority is within 100 foot of the coastal bank buffer. So the proposed house will not have an increase in bedrooms, so the septic system is not considered an increase in flow. However, this design is using an alternative septic system to enhance treatment to this flow, to the sanitary flow. In addition to that, the new house is going to have dry wells to collect roof runoff from this new house. And all the ornamental plants that are located to the far west along the 50-foot stretch of the property line are going to be replaced and installed. We're going to be installing native trees and native shrubs. It's not the entire 50-foot because a good portion of that 50-foot is the existing driveway that's shared with the last neighbor to the west. So there's approximately a 12-foot depth of native plants that are going to be located to the west of the property, replacing existing ornamental plants. The septic system is located as far away as possible from all the resources. In particular, it's located 103 feet away from the coastal bank and 130 feet from the salt marsh. So it is at the furthest location that we can put a septic system from these resources, compared to the existing septic system, which is a cesspool located within 100 feet of the salt marsh and within 50 feet of the coastal bank. There is an overall decrease in development within the 50-foot buffer. The slight reduction accounts by approximately 26 square feet, and it's mainly because of the removal of the existing patios on the side of the house. The proposed native plantings account for approximately 450 or so square feet of plantings. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. I will open it up to the commissioners first for any questions or comments that they might have.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
just curious because I can't find it here, so apologies if it's right here in front of my eyes, but the existing cesspool, which is obviously going south, does that get closed in? It's apparently not on the plan? Because is it because the town records don't show exactly where it is?
So on the plan, if you can spot where the proposed septic tank is,
I do, yeah.
on the north right corner, there's a circle in dash lines, and there's a leader going to it, and it says existing cesspool per town records.
But do you think that's the actual location?
Right, so we received town records of
And they
tie cards.
confirm that? Okay, and so what do? You're gonna fill
So-
it in?
For this particular location, it's right next to where the excavation for the new tank is gonna be.
Yep.
This one will be removed.
So
when-
basically, you'll just cut around it and
Right, so.
eliminate it?
Once you open an excavation for
Yeah.
a tank, that's gonna be an excavation probably 8 feet down.
Mm-hmm.
The stone from that old cesspool will collapse into the hole, so that
Mhm.
all gets trucked away.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or concerns? No? Raul, what's the comparison of the square footage footprint of the proposed new dwelling compared to the one that's being raised?
You really had to ask that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, generally speaking, do we have an increased size of the building or not?
So the existing house is roughly 1,360 square feet.
1360.
And the proposed about 1,400 square feet.
$1,400 is the new. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Charlie?
No.
Checking to make sure he's paying attention. All set, Brian? Tom? Anyone in the audience that would like to question? Okay, Drew, I'll turn it over to you for your comments.
So just to show some images of the site, looking at the house from Slipper Shell Way. This is the existing structure. You can see just from the photos and from the aerial image, the lot is almost entirely pre-disturbed to some extent with either house or hardscaping footprint and loosely maintained lawn. And then you've got some ornamental shrubs here. This is the area, looking at the bottom right photo, where the mitigation is proposed. It's a bit of an unusual situation in that there's properties in between this one and the actual resource area. So going back up to the satellite image. So here's the bordering salt marsh coastal bank area, and this is the lot right here highlighted in the green. So it's not directly bordering, but it still lies within that buffer zone, and you've got some other developed properties between this house and those resource areas. So let's see, Board of Health comments. Septic plan approved by the Board of Health for a 2-bedroom dwelling. It's nice to see an IA system is proposed. Building comments from the building commissioner. Project will need relief from zoning board of appeals for, as per section 174-17.1 and possibly 174-31. So it'll need to go before ZBA. Mitigation plantings proposed for the alterations within those previously disturbed areas within the 50 to 100 foot buffer to the top of coastal bank. And I recommend to close an issue with condition of submission of a 1-year signed mitigation monitoring and maintenance contract with a qualified professional. As Raul had mentioned, you could do one of two things, because I know there was discussion on the absence of a DEP number for the commission a few meetings back. If you wanted to continue for receipt of that DEP number, or you could close an issue pending receipt of the DEP number. I don't imagine, just based on what's proposed, that DEP, when they issue the number, are going to have any additional conditions for this one. It's pretty straightforward. So it's your choice as to how you want to close an issue or if you want to grant a continuance.
Raul, do you have a date for zoning?
I don't have it. Chris Corain is making the application, or made the application, but I don't have a date yet.
Right. So you wouldn't be able to proceed regardless?
Oh, this construction will take a little while after it gets all the required permits. It's just that if we do continue, if it's just for the issuance of the number, NOI number, it's a matter that, do you want a representative, or is just a matter of just open and closing right away?
That's why I don't think DEP would have any additional conditions that would warrant the consultant to come back.
Sure.
Yep.
Does anybody not feel comfortable closing and issuing per, like, pending the receipt of the DEP number?
I would add pending any relative comments that the DEP might have to bring to our attention that we might have overlooked.
Okay.
I doubt that's going to happen, but you never know.
Sure.
So would you want it to be worded, would you want it to come back in front of us if there were comments from the state?
I think if a comment came up that was fairly important, then we would
Right.
certainly want to have them back to address it, sure. But again, I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. So I'm gonna make a motion to close an issue for Leanna Orr and Jesse Oberst for 7 Slippershell Way, pending the issuance of a DEP number and with the submission of 1-year signed mitigation, monitoring, and maintenance contract. And if there's any, how do you want me to word this? If there's any important comments from the state that it comes back in front of us, or?
Comments relative to a discussion?
Okay, any comments relative that comes back?
Okay, thank you, Alex. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Any further discussion before I call for a vote? There being none, Tom? Aye. Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Now calling the 606 hearing, Linda H. and David A. Pierce, 44 Waterway. Proposed raise and replace single-family dwelling with the new patio, pool, dry wells for roof runoff, a rinse station, air conditioner and generator pads, landscape, hardscape, new driveway, and upgraded Title V septic system, no increase in flow. Representative, Cape and Islands Engineering. This is a notice of intent. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Raul representing the applicant, and Andrew here also representing the applicant. So this project was continued from 2 weeks ago. The main reason for the continuance was that the board felt one of the arguments from the abutter to the north regarding the existing trees on the abutter's property were being compromised by the proposed work. So it was continued for the receipt of arborists to go to the site and review the trees and make any suggestions, recommendations on how, if it can be worked, that the root system for these trees were not harmed. So the applicant did engage with an arborist, and the first thing that the arborist noticed is that the trees in question are non-native invasive trees listed in the banned list from the state of Massachusetts. These are Norway maples, and for almost every project that I've done in this town that we have Norway maples, it's preferred for those trees to be removed as a get-go because they're pretty invasive and I guess they spread easily. So those are the trees in question, but the arborist did say that there is a way that the trees could be cut cleanly, the construction can take place, and the trees could still be preserved. So the contractor met with the arborist on site, so he has an idea of what he has to do for the construction of these foundations and these retaining walls, and at the same time protect those trees, although the trees are invasive and non-native. But in addition to that, after the first hearing, we got some comments, and because we got 2 weeks to work on the project, we did some revisions that were mentioned at the first hearing. One of the revisions was we added the soil test pits from the test that I did the week before last hearing. So that information is on the plan. We added the information regarding the dewatering construction methodology. It was discussed at the first hearing, so we added that to the plan since we had the opportunity to do so. And we also, so because of some comments that we received from the abutter's consultant, we relocated one of the dry wells that was the closest one to one of the Norway maples. The consultant for the abutter suggested that that dry well could be pushed to the southeast side of the pool. We were trying to avoid using that area for anything because that's within 50 feet to the coastal bank. But it is a subsurface component, so it's nothing that you can see on the surface. So elevation-wise, it's about the same elevations as the other location where we had it. So physically, it can still be constructed, and it's further away from those trees. The other addition we did to the plans, we added that the bottom of the leaching system should not be lower than elevation 3.5. So that keeps it above the highest tide that we've seen for the moon tides at this location. But that only That moon tide, which is called the king tide, happens mostly in the springtime. And the odds of those conditions to take effect while at the same time we have a rainstorm that these dry wells are taking water and the bottom of the leaching system is about a foot above that high king tide is very rare. So for 99% of the rain showers that this system is going to be receiving water from, that system is going to be much higher than 1 foot above that king tide of elevation 2.6 or so. There's practically not much more revisions done to the plan other than taking those comments from the first hearing and adding it to the plan. We still believe the project provides vast improvement for the resources and the wetland compared to what's existing. All the drainage that's being collected, a house that's being built in conformance with flood codes, and the extensive buffer improvement from what was approved a few years ago to what's being proposed now. We understand that there's another letter issued on behalf of the abutter to the north, and it was entered to the record, and is questioning more items on the project. And one of the things that I do want to emphasize, coastal banks are not just landforms. This existing bulkhead was built, I already forgot the year, but I think it was 2011. And before that bulkhead was in place, there was a coastal bank at that same location. The town conservation department has those plans, has those records. There was a coastal bank there. The new bulkhead was constructed, and it took the place of the physical landform, but it is still a coastal bank. It is still a vertical barrier to floodwaters. It is still a coastal bank. In this town and in all the other towns that I've been doing plans that go before conservation commissions, man-made structures along the water serve as coastal banks. We've done commercial marinas, public marinas, Falmouth Inner Harbor. All of those bulkheads have been considered coastal banks. And I'm treating this one no different. That existing bulkhead, like in the project just earlier today, that bulkhead is a coastal bank. So we don't have anything else to add, so we'll open it for the commissioners to, if they have any questions.
Thank you. Okay, I'll start with commissioners for questions and/or comments on the proposed changes and what we have here before us tonight.
I would just say it's a little, so, the Norway maples, like, yeah, they're not an ideal species, but if someone was to cut down a Norway maple on their property without getting permission from us first, and it was within the resource area, it wouldn't be allowed. So it's still a tree, it's still providing some function. So I'm wondering, and this is a little hard because it's on the neighboring property, but I'm wondering if there's like a way we could fast track, if the trees die because of this project, the neighbor can take them down and replant a different tree, like replace it with a different tree. Is there a way we can just discuss that and approve it now? But it's for a different property, so I don't really know that that would work.
I don't think we want to impose on the neighbor
Right.
something to do on an order of condition for this project.
Right, it doesn't work. So I guess that's just what's getting hung up in my head.
And something I would like to add, I don't know if everybody read the arborist report, but the trees after a certain height, the rest of the tree is main limbs that continue on. And what the report said is that those type of trees that grow off of limbs create a weak point where the limbs separate. And these trees feature that kind of
Yeah, they're known for
growth.
that.
That is already a weak point that those trees, a good windstorm, a good hurricane could bring them down,
Right.
and not necessarily be tied to what could happen at this property. For this project on the client's side of the property line, what the client can do is follow the recommendations from the arborist, keeping those roots nicely cut to provide a good heel of the roots, keeping the area moist for the root to keep absorbing water, especially if we have more years like this year that is so dry. But imposing a condition on the neighbor, yeah, I don't think that will be,
I wasn't trying to think of it as a condition, I was trying to do more of like a permission, but yeah, I agree, it is a little, it's hard to speak to the neighboring property in this filing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Raul, I've been looking at that drain pipe with the outfall,
yes.
and can you tell us something about the catch basin that's in the roadway?
So yes, like in New Seabury, there's a ton of low points along the
Right.
road.
Mhm.
This happens to be one of those low points, and there is a catch basin right at the southwest property line, and it's a direct discharge. It's just a catch
It's just a
basin, and
basin,
it's
no filtering capabilities in it at all?
Not that I know. All we know that we can observe the pipe that goes out, sticks out of the bank for about some 6-7 feet. And it's on the air for that length that it comes out of the bank. So I'm not sure if in between there is some leaching
Yeah.
capacity, which would technically be treatment. But it was, I don't even know how long ago it was built. Based on the construction and the size of it, it's, I believe it's a 6-inch or 8-inch size pipe diameter. So it's really old. Nowadays, and it's a metal pipe. Nowadays, the pipes that are being used are HDPE, plastic. So I'm thinking this is pretty old, and I'm not sure if there's any treatment ahead of it. The time that I was there, the pipe was probably 3 feet above the tide. There was no water coming through it, so I'm not sure what's happening. And I did not even venture to see how much of the neighborhood is draining to that one catch basin.
Right. Just caught my eye looking at the plan. Stormwater's a big issue these days.
Right, we have a note on our plan because we propose a dry well close to that pipe, so we have a note for that pipe to be exposed. But that's the best we can do. We don't want to interfere with it. It's been there for many, many years, so we just want to protect it. We definitely want to protect it because if that catch basin floods, then there's problem with the houses.
I may have asked this at the last hearing. I don't have it in my notes. What is the depth of the pool?
It was 6 feet, about 6 feet.
6 feet.
Yeah.
So you definitely have a use for that dewatering pit. That's going to be used, correct?
We believe if actually I can't say, but if the tides remain to what I saw when I was doing my perk test at elevation below elevation 0, the excavation for the pool will be dry. But if the tide comes back up a good 2 feet, like it could happen in the spring, the bottom of the excavation could see water come in. If there is a moon tide in effect, it could be a little higher. So the dewatering, the same contractor that's engaged to do this work did the 8-foot pool right across the canal, and they did use dewatering. So this dewatering methodology is the same one that he implemented on that project. So he could do that if it's needed on this site.
Okay.
It wasn't necessary on the other one. The other pool was at elevate, the coping of that pool was at elevation 6. So this one's at 7.3, and that pool was 8 feet deep. It did require dewatering. This one is going to be 6 feet deep, and it's the coping is at 7.3, so it's not going to be as deep as the other one. And they didn't really have any issues with any problems with the dewatering on that one, and that again is directly across the canal from this site.
And what percentage of the lot is land subject to coastal flow? I mean, I couldn't determine that from looking at the plan.
It's around 75%.
75%.
There are many lots that are 100% in the flood zone. Not on this street because the street's high, but I've definitely worked on several that are 100% in the flood zone.
You probably know my last question, comparison of the size differential between the two buildings, one being raised, one being built.
It's being reduced, I think, right?
I may have asked that 2 weeks ago.
So yeah, it's a slight reduction of 4 square feet,
It's a reduction.
3,517 to 3,513.
3,517 to 3,513. Okay. Thank you.
If I could add to that,
Sure.
in terms of structure, for what we have on the plan and those numbers that I just gave, the pool is a structure, so that number includes the pool.
But not the patio,
No, the patio is not considered a structure.
just the pool. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Charlie?
No?
Yes, we're good. Anyone in the audience would like to ask a question? Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. Arlene Wilson, A.M. Wilson Associates, here for the northerly neighbors, the Teitelbaums. Mr. Teitelbaum is here this evening. And I continue to have some concerns about, in particular, about the grading and drainage that's going on here. I was a little disappointed that the plan revision for the engineering plan revision didn't have the topographic information on the north side of the house added. So we're still in the same position we were at the last meeting in trying to decipher what the impact is going to be in terms of the grading and the drainage on that side of the house. The issue of the coastal bank designation is probably of limited importance in this case because the site is so altered and has been altered for a long time. Nevertheless, it would be nice, it seems to me, for the future to have the top of the real coastal bank designated on the plan as well. It would be easier to do if there were topographic information on the north side, but that's an issue for you people to decide whether you care about that or not. I had some difficulty trying to find the date of the revision on this plan. You know, what we get transmitted to us is something small, and we need to blow it up, but I couldn't find it. And so you may want to make sure that it's there so that when you write an order, because I'm sure this is going to get some kind of a permit, you don't have a problem referencing the plan in the future for construction. The biggest problem that I continue to have, as I said, is drainage here. I know that Raul is quite adamant that there's going to be enough capacity in that dry well on the northeast corner to handle the flow that's going into it, and that it's going to have enough distance above groundwater. But if that 2.3 elevation that he's got labeled as the high tide line is the top of the salt marsh, and that's where the water is twice a day. And if it's actually spring high tide, it's there several times a month. We have no way to control when we're going to get a significant rain event relative to the tidal cycle. I would hope that we would get more significant rain events rather than less, but when that happens, water comes up. The difference between this site in terms of groundwater and a site across the canal is that this is at the downhill end of the water table running north to south and towards the ocean. Whereas on the opposite side, the groundwater table elevation's already been interrupted by the surface water in the canal, and you're just picking up a little skim of something from the precipitation that comes down. So the impact of the water table is different on this side than it would be on the other side. As I said in my August 23rd memo, maybe the way to solve this problem is with a little landscape berm that would help to contain the additional drainage on this site when there is a significant rainfall with a high water table and with or without a storm event, or when they want to empty that swimming pool for some reason. If it gets full of salt water during a coastal flood event, for instance. It doesn't have to be very high. If the yard in that area along the Pierce's side of the property line seems to be roughly elevation 7. So about 12 inches would do. If they move the crest of that back into the yard a little bit with relatively flat side slopes, 12 inches is probably not even going to be noticeable in that width and length of lawn. Or they can make it part of the mitigation and plant it with a few shrubs. But it would help to ensure that the additional surface drainage stays where it's being developed, particularly since the Teitelbaum property is about a foot lower than this. If you can remember having gone out there, it sort of slopes down to the north a little bit. And unfortunately, the water side of the Teitelbaum's yard is a little soggy now. So that's really why they have significant concerns about that issue. You know, relative to the trees, yes, Norway maples are on the invasive list, but there isn't much else going on for big trees around here. They do provide significant biomass and habitat. And because the yards are being manicured, they're not being allowed to spread, so the seedlings aren't growing up here. I noticed in the arborist report that he was told that there would be 8 to 10 feet between the disturbance and the trees. That's the tree trunks, except that when the contractor, Mr. Fox, called me to find out what the neighbors' real concerns were, he told me that they would need to excavate almost up to the property line. In a discussion with Raul about how those footings would go in, I was also told that there would be 4 or 5 feet at a minimum of excavation beyond the new vertical concrete wall. So that doesn't really leave 8 or 10 feet to those trees. It's more like 4. And I know they're on somebody else's property, and they're really Mr. Teitelbaum's concern, but if they fall over, they'll be everybody's concern. And it'll be a loss, because those trees not only provide biomass and habitat, but they also help get rid of some of the excess groundwater, because they've got very large canopies, and they're transpiring groundwater to a significant degree. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to comment?
So yeah, if we can answer some of those comments and offer some ideas. I did read the idea that Arlene Wilson had in her last letter about a 12-inch berm along the northern property line, and just discussing with Andrew, that is something that if the board wants to condition it, a 12-inch high berm, it is rather minimum, and it will keep the runoff from the yard from crossing over the property line. And if the board wants to condition that, we could do so. The typical excavation of any foundation is usually a 1-to-1 slope. So when you have to do a 4-foot frost wall or excavation to get a footing 4 foot below grade, it's typically 4 feet down, 4 feet out for the excavation. However, after the comments that the builder received from the arborist, he said he could do something that is only a foot away for that particular north section that's close to those trees, only for that particular area. And they can do that with sheathing. So instead of the typical 4-to-1 slope that they do for the excavation to get down to the footings, they can do it more vertical with sheathing. So that could be implemented at this location. So it does keep everything further from those trees. And the arborist recommended there's a particular way of cutting the trees clean so that they can heal, keeping the area around the trees moist so that they can survive. And the board could condition those additional methods during the construction, and the project could move forward.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions before I call for a motion? Marjorie?
I'm just wondering if Drew had any commentary on those
I'm sorry, I didn't.
2 recommendations.
Sorry.
And actually, Drew is very sorry. Does you have any recommendation, particularly on the abutter's concern about the surface drainage and the berm language? That seems to be fairly innocuous, but might be prudent. It might be the prudent move on the part of the commission.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with, if the applicants are willing to construct a berm, I would certainly encourage that to be a condition of approval, as well as condition of making any and all efforts to reduce impacts to the tree root systems of all the trees that are, within close setback to excavation. So methodology of excavation, just basically a condition to make all efforts to reduce impacts to the trees. 12-inch high berm along the northern property line, and
Do we have any, sorry to interrupt you, but do we have any requirements when people are installing berms with the quality of fill or anything like that, if they're
it
adding
has to be
soil-
a boilerplate condition in orders is clean fill.
Okay,
So that would be part of the
okay.
orders. Yeah, and then a 3-year submission of a signed 3-year mitigation monitoring and maintenance contract with a qualified professional. The only other comment I would say is that pretty familiar with Norway maples, and I can appreciate their habitat value and that they're really the only remaining large trees amongst these two properties, but it may just behoove you as the homeowner to have them, keep an eye on them, because they do have recovery bark on them, which is a sign of weak, wherever you have split trunk, it's a weakness in the tree, and I would just put it out there to keep an eye on them, because Norway maples are infamous for that condition.
Dropping huge limbs.
Yeah, so just to put it out there, be mindful of it if you intend to keep them, so. No other comments?
Thank you. Okay. I will call for a motion then from one of our commissioners.
I move to close an issue for Linda H. and David A. Pierce at 44 Waterway with the condition of the tree root zone protection measures for the black oak tree and submission of a signed 3-year mitigation monitoring and maintenance contract with a qualified professional. He used all efforts to reduce the tree impact in the root system and a 12-inch high berm.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alex. Any further discussion by the commission before I call for a vote?
Oh, sorry, there was one other comment that I didn't put
Sure.
in for the Board of Health and Building Commission. I may have already stated these at the last hearing, but I'll restate them. So, Board of Health comments, property is in a Zone 2 and permitted by Board of Health for 3-bedroom septic system design. Plan to be reviewed upon submission to the Board of Health, minimum 25-foot setback from the soil absorption system to dry well. Subsurface drain must be maintained. Required setbacks from edge of the in-ground pool are 10 feet from the tank and 20 feet from the soil absorption system. Access to all septic components must be maintained. Asbestos inspection by a licensed inspector is required with abatement if necessary. And for the building department, building commissioner comments, no additional comments.
Thank you.
Vote, right?
Guess we'll call for a vote. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
And I vote no, based on the critical characteristics of presumptions of significance in Regulation 25 of Chapter 172, primarily lands subject to coastal storm flow. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Tamara Joyce. I'm here on behalf
Oh,
of...
he has to
not
call
yet.
the hearing
I'm
first.
so sorry.
We will let you talk, though. Now calling the 609 hearing for Richard T. Miller, 50 Coastline Drive. Proposed amended order of conditions 43-3084 for pool, patio, landscaping, and hardscaping. Representative Bayswater Development LLC. This is continued from August 11th, and it is a request for an amended order of conditions. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Tamara Joyce. I'm here on behalf of Bayswater Development, representing Mr. Richard Miller and his property at 50 Coastline Drive. The amended order of conditions is for the pool patio landscaping and hardscape, which we came before you on August the 11th. This is a continuation. We've created this new plan at your request, identifying the original footprint of the house and property bounds and the 100-foot, 50-foot setbacks, the dunes, the beach grass areas, and the distance to the coastal bank of the spa, and the drainage and drainage wells. Also the elevations. Now I'm wishing we had emailed you the color version that we delivered to the office. But we highlighted the 3 areas specifically, the elevations, which I have a couple of copies. I don't know if that's. The ones that you have are the same, but just not color-coded, unfortunately.
I'm feeling very neglected, but I can manage the colors.
Trench drain.
Oh, yay, much prettier.
Isn't it pretty in the color version?
Thanks, we shall share. There we go.
So during the last hearing, there were questions with regards to drainage, and we unfortunately had no representation on the one plan that was used at the presentation. I hope this shows now the intent of drainage, that there was drainage planned. Do the commissioners have any questions?
I'm sure some of them will. Is there anything else you'd like to say before I ask them? Okay, thank you.
No.
I'll turn it over first to the commissioners for any questions or comments based on the new information that's being presented this evening.
I would just say I'm not really thrilled with the planting plan. There are 9 out of over, I think, 50 plants here that are native, and they're the shamrock variety. So there's not really a good faith effort to put native plantings here.
Well, I knew that would be your concern. The homeowner has not definitively decided on plants, that these were drawn in, especially in the 50-foot area and by the pool side, as hydrangeas and the miscanthus. And the homeowner is agreeable to native plants.
Okay, so I would say anything within the 100-foot buffer should be native.
Okay.
And there are beautiful natives that can be poolside, that'll look good.
I printed out the list, and the homeowner has not been fixated in having to have the hydrangeas that somehow were drawn in,
Okay.
and they neglected to make that change from the last meeting to this meeting, and I
Okay.
apologize for that. I knew that was something that was a hot issue, and I apologize it wasn't addressed.
So you'll add that as a condition?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Although, I want to apologize to all of you. This is my glucose monitor. I have a new monitor for my diabetes, and it breaks through, so I've got it shut off, but it keeps breaking through because I was not a good girl today.
Coffee.
Yeah, it's saying to me, what were you thinking?
Health is everything.
So I apologize.
Fine, Marjorie. Any other questions? The rinsing station and the pool, the spa and the pool itself, are they tied into the same drywall configuration, or I assume for maintenance of the pool and spa, which
Yes.
one of these dry wells are you using?
It would be the trench to the east of the pool,
Okay,
the elongated
for the
trench.
pools.
This one, yeah.
And the rinse station is tied into,
Let me see, hold on, if you would. Oh, that would be on the far east side of the pool. I'm sorry, the far east side of the property line.
the property line.
May I hand you the color version?
Sure.
I think it's much easier.
I gave mine away.
I apologize that you all don't
That-
have the color.
That's all right,
It's so much
I gave
easier.
it over there.
Do you see, sir?
Yes, okay, elevations, distance. All right, thank you. Yeah, no, good. Any other questions or concerns? Charlie, nothing? Anyone in the audience? Drew?
Nothing more to add, really. I think the information that was requested from the last meeting has been added to the plan, and then just a recent update that will be forthcoming, we can condition, as Alex recommended, in a motion, the condition that all plantings, landscape or otherwise, within 100 feet within the buffer zone be of a native variety. And no other comments. No comments from the building inspector, and Board of Health has no comments. It's tied into existing police statute.
All right. I will entertain a motion.
I would move for an approval of the amended order.
Thank you, Charlie. Is there a second to that?
Can I add, how does can I add the
I would
conditions
say,
on top of
yeah,
that?
if you want to amend the motion to include,
Okay, I'll amend the motion to include the signed 2-year mitigation and monitoring and maintenance contract with the qualified professionals, and that all plants within the 100-foot buffer to the coastal bank are of a native variety.
Okay, so we have a motion that's been amended. Is there a second to that motion with the amendment?
Second.
Thank you, Marjorie. Is there any discussion on the motion that we now have on the table with the amendment? Charlie's probably not happy. There being no discussion, I will call for a roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote no. Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kind of botched.
This one's okay.
Now calling the 6/12 hearing for Sharon Margulies and Joel Golden, 22 Fells Pond Circle. proposed structural additions and modifications to an existing single-family dwelling. Representative Marsh Matters Environmental. This is a notice of intent. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commission members. Drew. Mike Ball from Marsh Matters for the record. I'm representing the applicants Joel Golden and Sharon Margulies. They're owners of the .42 acre property at 22 Fells Pond Circle. They're seeking an order of conditions from you that will authorize structural additions to their single-family residence. These are pretty modest additions. In your packet, we've got a set of architectural drawings by Architect. That's Tim Luff's company, and the property site plan there is by Warwick Associates. So the resource areas on the site are those associated with, it's actually not Fells Pond. I noticed that on the plan it says Fells Pond, but it's actually Jim Pond. We've got an inland bank, which I demarcated, and its buffer zone extends, as you can see, well into the house footprint landward of where the work is. There's also the coastal flood zone that extends onto the property. No work in the coastal flood zone is proposed other than mitigation with native vegetation. The ACEC for Wacoit Bay also extends onto the property. You can see that line that kind of bisects the house. So the structural additions are occurring on the northwest corner. There are some modifications and a small addition at the existing entrance of the house right there, yep, and that's mainly over existing hardscape, gravel, stepping stones. And then on the other side of the house, they're bumping out the house footprint by 4 feet and extending the deck out over an existing landscaping bed. So they're keeping the size of the deck intact pretty much, but just adding a little living space there. If you've been to the site, you'll see that there are 4 oaks that are growing up through the deck, and they would like to remove those trees. You can see in photo 2 there, I've pointed out that, yeah, there you go, those 3 trees. Those are scarlet oaks. They'll be removed as part of the project. On the northwest corner, there's 1 oak. I've kind of shown you an approximation of where the footprint will extend to, and you can see that 1 oak will be removed. For mitigation, in order to meet your bylaw requirements, I've drawn as a separate exhibit a planting plan that proposes 265 square feet of native plantings. That'll be located adjacent to an existing wooded buffer zone adjacent to the pond. So there, I've just included 3 different species in that planting plan, totaling 34 plants. I've included high bush blueberry, northern bayberry, northern arrowwood, all species that are in the currently occurring buffer zone. So they should be fine there. And in that area currently, if you see, I think it's photo 3 or 4, you'll see that the area, there you go, is currently just an area that's probably not well managed, but it is a bit of unmanaged lawn, and so that area would be filled in with native plants in allowing access around that side of the house. So I think that's all I have. I do think this project, as proposed, does meet your bylaw requirements and serves the interests of your bylaw and the act. And I'd be very happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you. Nice graphics in the presentation.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, looks really nice. Questions and comments from the commissioners?
Is the septic is being relocated?
A portion of it has, and that has been approved by Board of Health. Yeah,
Okay, so that's not part of this current proposal?
that's
That
not
was the
part of
question
this.
I had. I wasn't sure if that was part of this or.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
Have we already approved, have we already seen a filing for the septic? Wouldn't we normally see one?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go back and,
Yeah, and Pete, Pete McEntee of Engineering Works, I know he's been handling the septic aspect of this, and I know Board of Health has reviewed. I just don't know if he's been before you to approve that move.
I don't recall it.
You do or you don't?
I don't.
You don't recall?
Go back several years, Drew, maybe.
yeah, I don't know. I'd have to do some
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
I know that Pete McEntee is well aware of jurisdiction, so I would imagine that,
Yeah.
venture to guess that it was part of a filing, but I don't know the timeline. When that filing would have been done.
You could certainly make that one of the conditions, that after you do your research, that it turns out that it's already come before the commission.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So the square footage of mitigation plantings, that's mitigating for the additions or for the removed trees?
For the additions, for the structural addition, so we've got about 40 square feet in the 50-foot buffer to the inland bank, and the remainder is in the outer 50-foot. And so by my calculations, we're required to plant 265. We are adding a tree. If you can see up near the north border, there's some space up along the existing wooded area where we could put an oak tree. I didn't propose mitigation for those trees within the deck. I don't think that is necessary, but obviously the commission may have a different opinion.
It's just a lot of structure in the flood zone. I mean, is there space on the property to put 3 more trees?
I would think in that area, I think the only concern would be proximity to the addition. Drew, if you could just scroll down a little
Yeah.
bit. Really, the only spot would be up where we're proposing that one tree. The lot is pretty wooded to begin with. If you've been there, there's a lot of kind of canopy coming in over the house, in near the house, so that there really isn't a lot of room. I don't, even the one tree that we're proposing, I'm not sure how successful it's going to be in that location. Yeah, that's a pretty good picture right there. You can kind of see all the woodland surrounding the house.
Okay.
And this is not one of those properties where you have a lot of lawn area.
Right.
It's pretty well unmanaged.
Okay.
Yeah, those are good photos.
Any other questions? Charlie?
No, I'm all set.
I'd ask the audience, but there isn't one any longer, so Drew, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, not much to add here. It's, the only comment I had has already been, will be investigated, which is the relocation of the existing septic tank, denoted on the plan, which Mike has clarified has already been done, so we'll look into if that was covered with a permit or not. Yeah, and then just the 3 oak trees coming out of the deck, and that's a pretty common situation in New Seabury where, the way I looked at it was that it's just an automatic hazard.
Right.
They're growing right over the roof and, I always cringe when I see that situation because it's just an accident waiting to happen. There's so much debris that falls on the roof, they should be removed just from a risk standpoint. So that's why I didn't comment on any mitigation for those, just because of their proximity to the house, so. Let's see. Board of Health, comments, property is in a Zone 2 and permitted by the Board of Health for 3 bedrooms with existing conventional system. Floor plans to be reviewed upon submission to the building department. The addition of Any habitable space that meets the definition of a bedroom in Title V will be considered an increase in flow and would require a septic upgrade. A septic inspection is required if a change of footprint is proposed. And for
Drew, if I can ask one, is there a date on that, those comments? Is that just standard after NOI is filed and they provide comments, or are those old comments?
These are recent comments.
Very recent, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just received them the last day.
I'd be happy to pass that along to Pete McEntee.
Yeah.
Just so he's sure that he's complying with
Sure.
that aspect of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And building inspector, comment, project is by right. I'm not really sure what that means, but that's his comment, so.
What was it, I'm sorry, what was the comment?
Project is by right. I don't know. I'd have to get clarification on
By
what he
right,
means
okay.
by that, but,
Huh,
so.
Wait, this is a 3-bedroom house?
I believe so. Built in 67. Three-bedroom, yes. 6 rooms.
So are they all calling it Jim Pond nowadays?
I'm sorry?
Are they all calling it Jim Pond nowadays? I always knew it as Fells Pond, but it's shown on the maps as Jim Pond.
Yeah, it's odd to see Fells Pond Circle adjacent to Jim Pond, but.
Yeah.
Poor Jim.
I know, I feel bad for Jim a little bit.
I know. He's so easily forgotten.
Well,
No other comments?
okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. I will,
So just to be clear on the
Yes.
condition, before we move forward, Mr. Chairman, would it be the conservation agent is gonna check on the septic permit, or is it pending the septic permit? Does it matter?
I wouldn't make it as a condition. It's just something that I can investigate, and if it requires an after-the-fact follow-up, I can make sure that occurs, but I don't know if it's necessary. My recommendation would be not to make it a condition of approval. The work's been done, so it's really just a matter of whether it was done on record or not.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Then I move to close an issue for Sharon Margulies and Joel Golden at 22 Fells Pond with the condition of submission of a signed 2-year mitigation monitoring and maintenance contract with a qualified professional.
thank you, Brian. Alex, second. Thank you. Any further discussion by the commission on the motion that we have on the table? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. Tom? Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex? Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy, I trash this binder every time. Sorry.
Don't think she hasn't noticed.
You should see my desk at home. Okay. Now that we got all that business out of the way, we can continue with our own business.
Okay. Just a quick word on the certificate of compliance inspection for 5 Point Road. It did pass inspection. It was for vista pruning. but it looks like, based on the site visit, vista pruning wasn't conducted in a long time, and because the property is up for sale, I've informed the consultant that the new homeowners will have to schedule an on-site with me and the chosen contractor that when they wish to pursue vista pruning again during the time of year, so that everyone's on the same page, because the new homeowners are undoubtedly not going to be familiar with those
They won't be
conditions.
aware of that, right?
It's a pretty easy thing to take care of there.
They would get a copy of this CLC though, correct?
Yes.
So they know that they're involved.
Whether they read it or not is.
Yeah, it's in a big pile of papers. Sure, it's all a blur.
It's just in here.
So going into the updates, the Red Brick Road culvert, I'll be attending an neighborhood association meeting on September 10th, which is a Saturday, just to answer any questions about the next phase of the Red Brick Road culvert replacement. And we're going to have ongoing grant research, planning and permitting construction phases. I know that the town of Falmouth was given an estimate for permitting that today was their deadline to request funding for their annual town meeting. So our DPW director furnished them with that information. I didn't get a chance to read exactly how much it was, but it will let the agent know how much to request in funding from Falmouth.
You know, on that topic, Drew, I listened into the bidders conference, the ARPA bidders conference on the 18th. And that looks like an opportunity for funding that we could probably go in jointly with Falmouth.
What was this?
This was the, I believe it's the Tier 2 small and medium-size grants through ARPA.
ARPA?
Yep, they run from 100,000 to 250, and then 250 to 500.
What is ARPA? What is that?
The American Recovery Program.
Okay.
It just, the more I listened to it, the more I thought, this might be a perfect match
Okay,
for that.
good.
And I recorded the entire conference. I can get that to you if you want to listen to it.
Yes.
And I took a bunch of notes as well. I was going to, we were going to reschedule that meeting, and I don't know if that was.
Yeah, so I believe it's going to be next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday will be the date. I'll confirm the date and the
We
time.
can probably kick it around. There's
Yeah.
a deadline for the letter of intent has to be in by, I'm going from memory. Hold on, oh, I have my notes right here. The letter of intent opens up on 8/24 and it runs to 9/30.
Okay,
And it has to include the budget, the project narrative, the project staff, project schedule, dates,
okay,
and some other particulars I can go over with you.
sure.
But to me, it looked like something that this might be a good match for.
Good, good, that's encouraging.
Pick up some money. Money is always nice,
Money is
especially when they
always
just
good.
give it to you.
Always worth the app.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next item, Upper Quashnet Restoration, still ongoing planning and preparation for the permit level design plans. No new specific updates, just ongoing planning and preparation there. Bylaw Review Subcommittee, I did hear back from both Paul and Alex, looking like September 1st would be the consensus so far. But Brian, I don't know what your availability is, but if you want to just let me know if September 1st works for you. I'm pretty wide open, morning or afternoon.
Okay.
So, but we can kind of pencil that in for our next meeting.
Would that be Zoom?
Yes,
Through-
we Zoom.
okay.
Yep.
No sandwiches?
Huh?
No sandwiches? or-
No,
I don't know why you can't send them to everybody's home, so you can zoom in with the sandwich.
You get a free meal, so.
maybe someday. Jones Pond and Santua Pond milfoil, so I was in error the last time I provided an update at the last meeting that I had assumed the treatment had taken place that Wednesday prior to the previous meeting, but it was actually this past Wednesday. It was the next Wednesday. So apologies for that, but nonetheless, we got assistance from Department of Natural Resources to send out postings in all of the public and private access ways to water around Johns Pond, State Boat Ramp, private association beaches, public beach, and they posted advisories all around prior to the treatment, or the treatment did subsequently take place. Same methodology as before. Procelicor is the aquatic herbicide that was used, and a specific dilution to treat approximately 3 acres of remaining milfoil that survived the last round of treatment just outside the lagoon channel area in the southern end of Johns Pond. I did request prior to treatment that the contractors look at the lagoon areas. There was a neighbor, a resident on the lagoon, who said his neighbor had seen milfoil in that area. As it turned out, it was a form of bladderwort that closely resembles milfoil, but is actually native. So that was clarified for the neighbors and not treated. So we'll just wait for the next follow-up survey just to determine how successful this last round was, and I would assume that this would be the last treatment that we would see for milfoil on Johns Pond, because the initial treatment was for 8 acres, and 3 acres remained spotted areas of milfoil, so it seemed like the first round was pretty effective, and the second round should be equally as effective. So, but once we receive that follow-up survey, we'll, which won't be until probably mid to late fall, just to ensure that we're past the dormancy, or right up to the dormancy season for milfoil, so that would be the opportune time for them to go out.
I have a question about John's Pond.
Yeah. Excuse me.
I was looking at APCC's website and their, what they put out for cyanobacteria testing. Do we, in Mashpee, test our own ponds for it? I know like they're kind of like one of the authorities around Cape to like notify when folks.
Yeah, DNR does regular testing.
Okay,
I think
because,
it's-
yeah, for some reason, they did 3 other ponds in Mashpee, but not John's Pond.
Yeah.
So, okay. I was
But
just-
yeah, DNR does test Johns Pond.
Okay.
Yep,
Great.
sure. And then I still have to schedule, speaking of DNR, a Zoom meeting between myself and the DNR director and Water and Wetlands, the contractor for the milfoil treatment, to figure out what a strategy for Santua Pond. So that'll be happening soon. And I'll be starting to apply for the permit through DEP through a notice of intent to get this before the commission. So it may not happen this year in time before the dormancy season. Hopefully it will, but if not, we'll get it in place well before the next growing season. As everyone knows, it's just one of many problems associated with Santua Pond. So,
Right.
but we certainly want to get it going on it sooner than later. Chopchick Bog, ground penetrating radar results, which I brought up at the last meeting, they have just been finalized, so no real changes there. There is a revised timeline for the remaining project deliverables under Phase 2, which is the planning, permitting, and construction phase. And I'm currently working with Division of Fish and Wildlife and the In lieu fee program and Horsley Witten Group to adjust the contract that the town has with the In lieu fee program, which is the provider of the grant funding. And the whole conversation is really just going to make sure that we are staying on track for early to mid-winter of 2023 for finishing construction of this wetland restoration. So we just want to make sure that we're still on track. We got a little bit of a late start with the notice to proceed for the consultants, so that kind of threw off the scheduling of each one of these phases. But I believe we're still going to be on track for that construction deadline, which is good to see. And it'll be exciting to see this project that our assistant agent Caitlin had started. And I know she's been contacting us to, every once in a while to see what the status is. And so it'll be nice to, progress towards the construction phase and see this bog converted to a wetland. And let's see, I don't have any new updates for the local comprehensive plan. I don't know, Paul, if you've heard anything new. I know they're continuing public outreach, but I haven't
I
heard any.
think they're close to having the survey ready. I think that's the
Yeah,
next
they
big
emailed out about that.
piece.
They
Right,
did.
that was in their last email.
Okay.
And there's a few small outreach sessions that are still scheduled. I forget
Okay.
they were.
And the last item is this was brought up at the last meeting, formation of a land acquisition subcommittee. So, be looking for any commissioners who may be interested in forming the
There's a
subcommittee.
hand up right there.
Me, oh, look at you.
Alex?
Yeah, definitely.
Isn't it wonderful that you're so geeky? No, you know all of this stuff, and she's ready.
This way I can complain about it.
I hope
when
you
nothing's
take that
happening.
as a huge compliment, if
And
it was meant.
Is that a subcommittee of conservation?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you need other?
It would be good to have more than one, yes.
Yeah, come on.
I can volunteer and step up, doesn't matter.
Brian?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Ryan,
There you go.
nice.
Okay. So I will, I'll put together, I think the first thing we want to do is put together a list of priority properties, which I've been working with Evan, Lara, the town planner, to see, we have a couple of properties in mind already. You know, as you are aware, the 751 Main Street, which is directly abuts Pickerel Cove, and then there's a couple of other parcels, some out by the Quashnet River, near the golf course, and another, I think it's a 11-acre parcel right off of 130 that abuts, goes all the way from 130 to Mashpee Wakeby Pond. But we'll put together a thorough list, and then we'll start looking at that in our first, and coming up with a date and time for our first meeting with Evan as well. There is one other item I just wanted to see if, Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind making a roll call vote asking for a roll call vote for discussion. And it has to do with the proposed bylaw amendment and regulatory changes for the upcoming fall town meeting.
Okay, sure. Do I need a motion for that as well?
Motion
Yes.
and second and roll call.
Okay. So I will ask then for a motion for a discussion this evening on the bylaw regulation changes that are being proposed.
I'll make a motion that we discuss that.
Thank you, Alex. Is there a second to open this up for discussion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Marjorie. Any discussion on the discussion?
Yes, the paper was extremely long, involved, and convoluted. I read it. But did you want to discuss all the pros and the cons?
What I wanted to,
Let's take the vote.
oh, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Gotta do
Oh,
the vote
sorry.
first, sorry.
We don't, you
That
know,
was part
it
of
might
my
not carry.
discussion, just I wanted to.
Okay, I'll ask for a vote. Tom?
What are we voting on?
We're voting on opening up a discussion on the articles, the bylaws that are up for
Town meeting.
discussion and possible adoption at the town meeting in the fall.
Are you not, we're still working on those?
Well, they've been officially submitted, but I did have just some discussion points to bring up in regards to.
So are we opening this to discuss it now?
Just to
Yes,
discuss.
That's the motion.
Okay. I don't understand why we need to make a motion just to discuss.
Because it's not, I didn't put it on the agenda,
Oh,
so anything that's not on the agenda that I'm requesting to be discussed has to be approved through a roll call vote.
I'm just wondering why we couldn't discuss it, why we have to discuss it at 8 o'clock at night.
It's you could take a vote, that's, I mean, that's,
I'd like to discuss it, but I
Yeah,
think
call.
it should be put as an earlier agenda item rather than not on an agenda,
the only,
a public meeting.
well, the only reason I put it on this agenda is because at the next selectmen's meeting, they're gonna be finalizing the town meeting warrant, so there's not an opportunity for the commission to discuss between now and then. So it is a bit time sensitive.
Well, I'm more than happy, I'd like to discuss it. But I think it's too bad that it wasn't on the agenda.
But
So
it's-
that if someone else wanted to come from the public, that they could have also discussed it. So doing this, the people from our community would not be able to discuss it. But of course, I'm more than happy to discuss it, because that's all we have left.
Yeah, this is the only item that I have on here. So, yes.
So it's yes.
So you vote yes. Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
And Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
So it was just a couple of updates that I wanted to provide the commission on, and that the article for I think section C that the consultants proposed for restricting new structures and new development in the flood zone, that has been redacted and removed. And that was made known to the selectmen at their last meeting. And the reason for that is really because Evan, the town planner, Evan Lever, is working on some zoning changes as well that have to do with the flood zone, and we want to make sure that we're kind of on the same page. And I think that it just needs to be vetted out a little more. It's a very broad kind of language that's, proposed for that restriction, and I just think it needs to be defined more, and I think we need to wait for, extended discussion with the town planner and the proposals he's making to the zoning bylaw changes for development in the flood zone before we move forward with that. The other update is in regard to the fertilizer, banning of the use of fertilizer within the wording right now in the article language is that there is no fertilizer usage within any of the resource, like quote-unquote resource areas under the bylaw, chapter 172-1, where it lists all the resource areas. And discussing with Ashley Fisher, the DNR director, I asked, is that meant to include the 100-foot buffer zone? And she said, yes, but the way it's worded, it's not. It seems like it's just wetland resource area, so that needs to be redefined as well. And I did have some concerns too, because when you're looking at banning all, fertilizer usage within wetlands jurisdiction, we do require a significant amount of mitigation for a variety of projects, as conditions of the order of condition, as conditions of approval. And those mitigation plantings do require some form of startup fertilizer to get them going. So I think that's something that also just needs to be vetted out a little more. As far as the expansion of the buffer zone, from the proposal to expand it from 100 to 150 feet, that was still remained unchanged. I was requested to provide clarification at the last selectmen's meeting, which I did, and then written clarification to the FinCom Finance Committee, who was meeting tonight, which I obviously couldn't attend that meeting. So one of the things I just kind of highlighted was that in Regulation 29, there are citations based on existing literature. And then there's a chart that explains, the estimated percentage of pollution removal and sedimentation control depending on the width of a buffer zone. And currently, the 50-foot buffer zone provides, based on this literature and based on the chart that's based on that literature in our Regulation 29, provides minimal wildlife habitat, a 50-foot wide buffer zone, and less than 60% pollution removal and effective sedimentation control. So increasing this by an additional 25 feet will improve that situation. But I did point out it's not the cure-all, but it's a step in the right direction, basically. So because I know we've been getting a lot of feedback on this proposed expansion, and so I just wanted to, update the commission on what I'm basing this on. It's not just picked out of thin air because we want more of a buffer zone, but it's based on sound science and existing literature. So I provided those citations to the Finance Committee and to the Board of Selectmen if they want to delve into it a little further. But, and looking at that chart, if you're looking to get up to a 90% removal of pollution and sedimentation control, you're looking at a 650-foot wide buffer zone. So this really isn't asking for a lot, in my opinion.
Right.
It's not a major change, but one that I think just allows the commission a little more leeway in dictating how wide a buffer zone should be left, particularly for undeveloped lots. But, and I did reiterate to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee that, you know, if this additional 25 feet is going to put the developability of a lot in jeopardy, there's always the waiver section that applicants can bring before the commission for your discretion, you know, to look at that situation if that were the case. So it's not, there's a lot of feedback we were getting is, I can't build now that it's 150 feet. There were a lot of assumptions out there that simply
Sure.
weren't true. So I did my best to inform and try to clarify some of those concerns.
Right.
I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that these are the most recent comments and changes. So.
I was at the selectmen's meeting the other night, and it was apparent that even members of the select board weren't as knowledgeable as I think they should be in terms of wetlands and regulations. And indeed, I think the entire general public is in that same frame of mind. And I was going to suggest tonight that in addition to a land acquisition subcommittee, that we create an education subcommittee. I mean, it's been my thing for my entire career, environmental science education, so I'd be more than happy to lead that initiative. I think the residents of the town of Mashpee understand that we have to do something because of the quality of our environment as it spirals down. But they probably don't know what that something is. And I think we sit here meeting after meeting after meeting, and we have hearings to condition projects, which is our prime responsibility. But our bigger responsibility is to educate the residents in this town. I think there's a dire need for that, so that if and when regulation changes come, people will get it. They'll understand that these are some of the things that have to be done. The proposed sewer is not the savior for the town of Mashpee. It's going to be a long time before it gets here, and in the meantime, there are many things that we can be doing to mitigate nutrient pollution to our waters and our lands. And the sooner we start some of those, the better.
Yeah, Paul, it's a great idea.
Great idea.
So I would, can I ask for that committee this evening?
You sure, if you'd like?
If,
Or maybe we should put it
close
on
the
a,
discussion and then,
Put it
here's
on,
what I'll
put it on
do.
a
put it on the
future
next
agenda.
agenda.
Yeah.
Think about it
Yeah.
till our next meeting, and I would like to have that.
Then you'll introduce a motion.
And, you know, I'll have additional things to say about
Good.
some of my thoughts for educating the town of Mashpee for things that can be done.
Sure.
And
Excellent.
they're not major things, they're little things. I see people in my neighborhood, and they've got that Scott fertilizer thing out there, and they're going because they just want that green grass.
Yeah,
And then I see the pellets in the street, and I see the watering going on, and I can see it going right to the drain, and I know where it's going, Dutchman's Creek, Hamlin Pond. It's,
Yeah.
you know, bing, bang, boom, it's in. But they don't get it. They don't see the forest for the trees. It kind of reminds me of some of my high school students that didn't get it. But anyways, I digress.
and now they're serving in Congress, go figure.
Yeah,
I
know
think
it.
if we call it like an outreach committee versus an education committee, I think that is something that we should be doing. I think that a lot of our, town boards and stuff, we don't really see as much engagement in outreach. I also would be, interested to see how the board wants to move forward and or if they were going to move forward or if they're going to oppose it, because then I think that it is in all of the residents' discretion to file a petitioner's article. If we miss, obviously the fall, we do have the May for that. And then just to be mindful of the fact that we have open town meeting, so it's on all of us to be vocal and to advocate at that. It doesn't just go and start here and end here with us advocating for initiatives for the department and all the other environmental issues going on. So I would just, remind people to be active and, show up to town meeting and keep on, voicing any concerns that we have.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Excellent.
That's,
So I just had under the heading of discussion, Drew, on your discussion on amendments to what you've already distributed and what we're going to be recommending
Yes.
for the fall. Has that already been changed? And do you need our approval to go ahead and submit that? Because I know we've already missed the deadline. Haven't we missed the deadline for the warrant? I mean, for the,
Yeah, but you still
No.
have an opportunity to make final edits
yeah.
and changes, as long as, substantively, it's the same article language, but to make
Yeah.
changes to that. there's
I'm
still
just
time.
looking for what you need from us, because I thought,
If you wanna
all
take
kidding
a-
aside, I thought it was an
If you
excellent,
wanted to take
it was great.
if you wanted to take a vote of endorsement, I don't see any harm in that. I think it would probably be a good idea
Yeah,
to do that.
I think we should too. We have to take care of first the motion first, or can we introduce a motion
I
to?
would just like to discuss this as well.
Sure.
My own opinion.
Go, we're in discussion, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that where we're in?
Yes.
Right.
I just passed my 30th year in business here in Mashpee. And we've built responsibly on the water in 13, 15 communities. And we've always encouraged people to add more mitigation, understand the amount of lawn that they should be thinking about, drainage, erosion, all of these things. All of these things are good. I think that the 75-foot buffer is not workable given the way Cape Cod was laid out. Many of these lots are very small. And now I've done over 400 projects at this point, okay? These lots were laid out in the 40s and the 50s. And at that time, perhaps Cape Cod was a very simple place where they had cottages that had no partitions. I mean, it was just very simple. And just like our nation going forward in every community, we progress. And you can't live in open ranches from the 70s or the 60s or the 50s. And so then you try to put a structure on a property where the lot is only 110 or 120 feet front to back. You take 75 feet from the back, then the setback from the street is 40. These people are going to be left with many, many unbuildable lots. And to expect them to come in on a waiver, and I'm not naive. In other words, this committee has changed, where we see that already there's a lot of things that aren't being passed, not based on current bylaws, but bylaws or people's opinions. So to tell people, oh, don't worry, your lot will still be buildable. You can always come in for a waiver. I really feel that is not what the reality is going to be. And a lot of people will be faced when they try to build a house, and not a McMansion, a house, that they will be left with nothing based on that 75. I think the idea of the more mitigations, more trees, even more jurisdiction to the 150 is something that is worthy. But I think the 75-foot buffer, it will force so many lots and so many people to not be able to reconstruct their homes, which are necessary. We remove asbestos from these homes. We bring them up to code. We build them to modern standards, and I object to that, and I will not support these changes based on that 75-foot setback, because I know, I've seen the lots, and for many people, it's completely unmanageable. It's not realistic. There are other ways to create cleaner water on a lot through more mitigation, trees, new technology. Look at how they've cleaned up the base over the last 40 years with ozone. These kinds of, we should be a leader in trying to understand new technology and really endorsing these and spending the money even for our ponds, trying some of these things. But the 75-foot setback, it will put so many lots just out of business and families not being able to reconstruct their home. And I think that needs to be, I can't endorse that. So that's where I am, and I appreciate you
Okay.
listening to me.
Anyone else?
I would say that just to clarify, I mean, you mentioned, raise and replace homes and how the 75-foot setback would impact that, but the 75-foot buffer zone is not going to, so for instance, right now, we've got a lot of pre-existing non-conforming structures, even with the 50-foot, correct? You know that that's pretty prevalent, especially in areas like New Seabury, right? So when someone comes in for a raise and replace, they're essentially looked at as grandfathered in place, even if they're inside the 50-foot. They can't expand out. So how is the 75-foot going to impact that at all? It's not. We're talking about the major impact, if you will, is on undeveloped lots, and there aren't many of those left, particularly in areas of wetland jurisdiction. So that's where you're looking at the 75-foot full impact. 75 feet, the commission isn't going to require that a tear-down rebuild maintain a 75-foot setback in a pre-existing non-conforming scenario. So I think that's important to point out, because you seem to think that that's going to be the case, and it's not. This is really for lots that are completely undeveloped.
That's not how it reads to me when I read through the bylaws.
Okay. Well, that will have to be made a distinction.
It's definitely included in the same verbiage.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. That needs to be clarified then. And I did say that specifically at the selectmen's meeting as well.
But it's not clear in here
Right,
at all.
right, yeah.
And,
Understood.
And I believe that's why it's still being worked on, because the warrant still can be executed up until September 12th or
Okay.
13th.
So we'll definitely
Is that
work
right?
on this
Okay.
on the first. We can
So there's a lot of
look
work
at some
going
more
on.
language.
Yeah. So we do have, we're having another meeting on the 9th, so
Or 9th?
8th.
And if you look at some of these articles, they've been redacted because the people that are bringing them forward realize that the wording in them might be misunderstood by people at town meeting. And to me, that encourages a false vote. As I said earlier, I think one of our prime goals is education. Education in terms of wording these articles, so when they come before town meeting, people clearly understand what these articles involve. But in the bigger picture, educating the people in the community.
All I have right now in front of me, Paul,
Yep.
is this.
Right?
So until this looks like it's clear and 75 buffer is not for grandfathered and people can still do a raise and replace and bring homes up to code and there not be punitive, sort of these things where you're talking about and that they can't have any increase, that they have to use the footprint of what they have. I think that's unrealistic. That was another thing in here that I still read, basically, that there's to be no increases in the flood zone, and that also is completely not workable.
But so look at the one that came tonight, where there was an increase within the 50-foot buffer. So it was a 40 square foot increase, so then he offset it with mitigation plantings. So it would be similar to that.
Yes.
But instead of
That's
being
our
the 50.
That's our current bylaw, but that isn't what's suggested here.
Yeah, so that it would be in the 75, you could, if you were raise, rebuild, and expanding on that footprint, you would have to mitigate for it. That's how I read it. Am I correct?
But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, it shows to me, the way it reads, is there's no increase in footprint allowed within the flood
No,
zone.
that needs to be, well, I mean, the flood zone is, that whole section is being redacted. It's not even moving
But
forward.
that's the way it's still in my copy, in other words,
Right.
where it says that.
Yeah.
So just,
And the other thing is with the flood zone thing, well, one of the issues that everyone has to think about is what they're suggesting, which actually perhaps will create more erosion, the way they want no retaining walls. That is something that there's a reason that you do that, because you don't want to have a house like in North Carolina or in, that's up on stilts, and then they said grade within the first 10 feet. Well, how are you going to grade in the first 10 feet? There's a reason that you permit through conservation properly retaining walls to allow for very soft grades to not shed water from on.
But how can a salt marsh retreat?
What's that?
How can a salt marsh retreat with water rising if there's a wall, if there's a physical barrier in the way? Like, where is a salt marsh going to retreat to?
This isn't anything to do with salt marshes.
I know, I'm
This has
asking.
to do with, for example, the way they're talking about is if a lot is in the flood zone, okay? And currently, normally the septic goes in the front of the rebuilt house. Now, if the flood elevation is 12 and we're building 13 to be 1 foot out of it, okay? Now, if the road is 8 and we've got to make up 5 feet to the garage, okay? You grade the 40 feet and you have cover over the septic system, okay? What they're saying is that the grading would have to take place in the first 10 feet from the foundation. So now you're up at 13 and you've got to come down to 8 within 10 feet. And so you can imagine what the pitches would be. How would that ever work? How would you get up to the front door? How would you deal with?
I thought you were talking about like retaining walls.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about specifically, it has to do with their foundation walls and retaining walls, because they're thinking somehow that's going to ensure that people don't put a full-size basement or something. Somehow they're thinking along those lines. But they're going to be creating issues by taking that ability to permit proper terracing on a property. And that is just something that you might discuss with him, because that is beneficial to the environment. It's beneficial to a neighborhood. I would thought, if you have a 90-year-old mother in a wheelchair, how do you get them up, make a ramp? It's impractical. It's not workable. And that one specific thing is something they could have thought, for example, they could have said, okay, no more than 6 foot height in a crawl space, for example, because then they would have known that wasn't habitable space. There are other ways to do that. So it's not through retaining walls. That's an error that everyone will regret. You know, you've looked at projects to soften erosion and all of that, and plantings and.
Let me ask you this. Regardless of whether you're raising a structure up with retaining walls, whether it's 6 feet, 8 feet, you're trying to create a habitable basement, take all that off the table. When you go into a floodplain and you begin to grade up to these retaining walls, if we were in central Massachusetts and we were looking at isolated land subject to flooding, you would have to provide compensatory storage, because as you take up space in that floodplain, all you're doing is taking that water that should be sitting in that floodplain and pushing it to your next door neighbor. So how do you account for justifying building in a floodplain? I get it for that one house that you're talking about. You want to push somebody in a wheelchair up. What about everybody else in the neighborhood who has all of these houses being built around them, and you're building them up? Where's this water going?
Well, many of these supposed properties that are in the flood zone are put there arbitrarily by satellite. If you remember, but they're models, and
Really?
that's why there's the second part of this is this whole idea that the engineers have always been able to apply for a LOMA or a LOMR. And the reason they are is because they know the satellite is not accurate and that the properties, there's a 60% chance right now that you can remove your property from using a LOMA or a LOMR. And that is one thing that they want to take away, is the ability to do a LOMR or a LOMA.
Have you read this book?
I haven't.
Well, you should pick one up because they're right out here in the hallway. This book is the Homeowner's Handbook to Prepare for Coastal Hazards. It's funded by Woods Hole, the Sea Grant. You should read this because it's quite interesting. I know when I first came to Mashpee, I volunteered to help rectify the Osprey platform down in Monomoskoye because in those March nor'easters that came in 2018, that thing was flattened. And then I took a walk around this community because we had just bought our house a couple of years prior to that. And I took a walk down in East New Seabury and I saw the damage from that nor'easter. I saw the entire staircases taken off those buildings. So don't go there and tell me that these are fictitious satellite shots. This is real. This is real. And as the sea level rises, it's going to get worse.
Paul, I'm saying that the flood zones are acknowledged that they're satellite and they're not 100% accurate. They're not.
Okay.
That's why.
And there's no such thing as
that's why-
climate change.
Well then, oh, there is.
Oh, okay. Well,
Mr.
at
Chairman,
least-
can I just have a point of order? This is a really difficult discussion. And the reason why I think it's a very difficult discussion is because of, obviously, the situation at hand. Now, I just want to remind this commission that this commission took a conflict of interest vote from me when it came to an issue without hearing me out, first and foremost. Secondly, I don't know how we're having this discussion when we're talking about reconstructing homes and businesses with doing over 400 projects, and it could just be the perceived conception of a conflict of interest. Considering the fact that Tom has, expressed his concerns, as a commissioner or as a businessman, I'm not really sure, which role we're playing, but, people are always quick to talk about dual loyalty around here in carrying out wishes. So if the commission moved forward to support the amendments, would there be opposition? And then what opposition or stance are you taking? I think that rather than continuing to have this discussion, because it was already 8 o'clock and we didn't want to go past 8 o'clock or stay here for the discussion, and if we're going to keep on going back and forth, I think that we should take up a conflict of interest vote for Tom O'Neill when it comes to this situation. I mean, that's the only thing that I think that we can do to move forward, to err on the side of caution. I mean, we all take the state ethics board, things, and you have to worry. I hold many different titles in this town, but there's a time and a place when you put a certain hat on and you take a certain hat off. And because of all of this talk around the area, I just don't feel comfortable about the discussion. I don't feel comfortable about the input that's being done. I don't know if there's other, personal interest, and that's something that concerns me. And it should concern everybody and everybody that's watching. I mean, those are my concerns, and I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to continue down this path without taking up a conflict of interest vote, or at least placing this on the agenda and giving Tom the right to express his concerns and to advocate for himself, unlike what was done to me. I don't think that, two wrongs make a right. I want to make sure that we're following the policies and procedures, and we always talk about transparency. There's a reason why this board is one of the most controversial boards outside of, the select board or the school committee or any other, thing, because of their own personal interest. Like, I don't know what a lot of people do around this table or what your interests are or what your professions are, but when we come to the table, I would hope that we're all doing, what's best for the town and our residents and not, our pocket. So that's why this is a really, really difficult conversation for me. And I'm just sitting here and I'm being quiet, but it seems like we're just having a game of tennis at this point. It just keeps on going back and forth. And to Tom's point, it's already almost like 8:30. So that's just, I don't know how I feel. I mean.
Mr. Chairman?
That said, I will bring the discussion back to our agent in terms of the the talk of the amendments that are being brought forth before town meeting.
Can I just ask, I think to clarify, everyone has a lot of strong feelings about all of this, but I think to be germane and have everyone have their opportunity for input, the biggest question right now is to you, Mr. Chairman, which is what is the question on the floor? And the question on the floor is what we all need to deal with first and foremost so that we can then be free under Robert's rules to consider a very salient point, I think, that Brian makes, and Tom has his own. We all have our own, but they're not in order. I would suggest that they're not in order, given what the question is on the floor right now.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I could move the question to a vote. I believe the question was whether or not the amendment as amended in the way in which Drew had suggested to us can move forward for submission in September or whenever. I believe that's the question that's before us.
Exactly. Thank you.
So I move the question.
So you're making a motion?
I'm making a motion to move the question to go to a vote and discussion and to go to a vote on the question on the floor right now. That would then free up everyone around this table to have the opportunity, when the chairman opens up the floor again, to make further motions for discussion or at a later date to put them on the agenda for the next meeting.
Very good. Is there a second to that motion?
A second.
Thank you, Alex. Any discussion on the motion that's on the table? There being none, I will call for a vote. Tom?
I'm sorry, what was the, to repeat, what is the motion?
The motion is to end discussion and to go to a vote to move the original motion, which was the verbal amendments to the amendment that we all received from Drew that will eventually go on the warrant for a vote, the one that we all have had an opportunity to review.
I don't understand what I'm voting for, I'm sorry.
Are you done discussing? Are we ready now to take a vote on whether or not that amendment as amended shall go forward
What is
for the warrant?
What is the amendment?
To put in clarification language on this article.
I see, okay. Sure, I'll vote yes for that.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
Okay. So for the next meeting, I'll have draft language revised for the commission to take a look at before it finally gets submitted by the deadline for the execution of the warrant.
Is that something that we would discuss at our meeting next, on the 1st?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll work on that first.
Yeah, but you'll have that language before you.
Okay, I figured, okay.
And then can I further move that the other members, who I think each had valid points, if you want to make a motion to have the chairman put this on the agenda for the next meeting, I think that's in order now as well, correct, under new business?
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
To have any commissioners, I'm specifically thinking of Tom and Brian, if they want to so move now, to put on the agenda for our next meeting the issues that I think are they're salient issues for this commission. You know, I think we all should be fully disclosed on what our interests are here. That's an excellent discussion to have for our commissioners. And I think, Tom, your points were very, very broad, but definitely deserve a discussion. So if they so move, am I correct, Mr. Chairman, that if they so move, we can put them on the agenda for the next meeting?
Yes.
Can we move for executive session? I would feel more comfortable with that, just talking commission to commission, or?
Yeah.
Tonight or at the next meeting?
No, at the next meeting.
Oh,
Rather
okay.
than making an agenda item, if we can do executive session, so we're just talking amongst us without the public, and then whatever we decide on come out. Because I
That's
do
an
think that
excellent-
stuff like that should be,
I
you know,
think it's how it
confidential.
should be handled, I
Yes.
agree. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I would move, Mr. Chairman, to place executive session on the next meeting agenda.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
And there's a second. And any discussion on the motion that's on the table. Under that discussion, I would ask that we consult with the town manager to make sure we're
Sure.
good for executive session for that purpose.
Yes, I will make sure.
Any further discussion? There being none, I will call for a vote. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes?
Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
Can I
Okay.
make a motion to end this meeting?
Um,
Are we there yet?
We're done.
Yeah.
I think you could.
I did it. I make a motion to end this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on leaving?
My only discussion is just to acknowledge that Tom had an issue for the next meeting that you can do now or you can do later. If you don't want to do it now, then I'm going to support the motion to adjourn. But do you feel if you feel as though you've been heard for the next meeting?
I thought I shared what my.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
great. Tom,
yeah, we gotta vote.
in favor of
We gotta vote.
adjourning?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Marge?
Yes, sir.
Charlie's a yes, I heard him, and I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.